Welcome back to Everyday Eats with Michelle. Today I am making up a big old batch of my creamy tomato basil soup. I even gave making cheesy croutons a try. It actually turned out pretty well. Let's get started. First thing you're going to need to do is get all prepared. I've got a fine mesh strainer, about medium to large size. We'll set that over a medium to large size bowl. And then I've got a rimmed baking sheet covered in aluminum foil. Trust me, you're going to want this foil. It's going to help your cleanup so much. I don't know what size this is, but it was the largest one I had, so it's pretty big. I've got 4 28-ounce cans of whole peeled tomatoes in their own juice. You don't want puree. We want the juice, so make sure that that's what you're working with here. Okay, so what we're going to do, we need to roast these tomatoes. In order to help roast the tomatoes, speed up the process, and just make it so much more tastier, we got to get some of the liquid out of these tomatoes. Sometimes you'll get a little bit of skin still on tomatoes, not a big deal. Peel it off, put it to the side. So we're going to gently squeeze our tomatoes once we've cut them in half, just to get that juice out. And we're going to lay them in one even-ish layer, as even as you can, on your roasting pan, on your foil-lined pan. See how some of that juice is still hanging out in the bottom of our strainer? That's fine. There's a bunch of seeds in there as well. We don't want the seeds, but we do want that juice. We'll take care of that in a little bit. We've gotten through most of our cans here. I think this is my very last tomato. Get them into one nice layer. And then what we're going to do is we're going to add a little bit of brown sugar. I have light brown sugar today. Sometimes I have dark brown sugar. Doesn't matter. Either one works perfectly fine. You're going to sprinkle a light layer over all your tomatoes. It's going to add a nice, beautiful depth of flavor to your tomatoes as you roast them. Then we're going to pop them into a 450-degree oven for about 25 to 30 minutes until they're nice and dried out and roasted. Now we need to get to that juice. You could use a silicone spatula. Be all fancy about it. Don't bother. Just use your hands. It's a lot faster, a little bit messier, but a lot faster. So we're just going to push the juice through the strainer with our hand. We'll separate out the seeds. Some of the thicker pulp won't go through either. Perfectly fine. So all the juice that we had in our strainer from cutting our tomatoes, that we've taken care of. Now we've got some seeds. But there's still juice in the cans. You want that juice too. So we're going to dump that into our strainer. I usually do 2 cans at a time, otherwise it's too much in my strainer. And we're going to make sure we get all of that beautiful tomato juice separated from the seeds so that we can add that to our stock. It's going to be absolutely fantastic. Now here's the other thing. If you give the strainer, if you look at the bottom of it, we've got our seeds here. Great, we can toss those out in a minute. But look at all that's clinging to the bottom. That's good flavor too. Kind of give that a little scrape. You're not going to get any seeds because those are on the insides of the strainer. Scrape that off into your bowl. And then what we're going to do, we're going to set this aside and we're going to move on to building the base of our stock. So in a very large Dutch oven, mine's just a cast iron. You can use an enameled cast iron, whatever works for you. Medium-high heat, 8 tablespoons of butter. Let that melt down, get a little bit foamy, and then we're going to add in 4 to 5 medium to large shallots. I just slice them kind of thin. We're going to blend this all up again later, so it doesn't really matter how thick or how thin you slice them. Just make sure you're consistent. We'll let this go for about 7 to 10 minutes. You want your shallots to soften up a little bit. Okay, get all coated in that butter. And then with about 2 to 3 minutes left in the cooking, we're going to add in 2.5 tablespoons of tomato paste and a healthy dash of allspice. We'll stir that up, get that well incorporated, and then just let that hang out for, like I said, like another 2 to 3 minutes. Once that's happened, we're going to add in some flour. I've got about 4 tablespoons of flour here. The goal is to soak up some of that moisture with your flour. It's going to help thicken our sauce. If you notice after adding the 4 tablespoons, things still seem a little wet like I did, add in another tablespoon. See what happens. Still seems a little wet, add in another tablespoon, okay? You want your end result to be creamy looking, but not too wet. Then we're going to add in 3.5 cups of chicken stock. Which could be chicken stock, could be bone broth. Either way works perfectly fine. What you do want to make sure you do is whisk it as you're adding, because as you whisk the bottom of that pan, you're going to be scraping up all those beautiful brown bits from when we sauteed our shallots in the butter. And that's going to add fantastic flavor to our stock. Now we're going to pour in that reserved juice we had from earlier, all that beautiful tomato juice, right down into our stock and shallot mixture. This is going to be absolutely fantastic. Get this nicely incorporated. And then we're going to add in some basil. I normally buy a packet of basil. They didn't have any this time, so I just bought these 2 cute little plants. I'm probably, honestly, going to use most, if not all, of these basil leaves, okay? You're just going to pick a few leaves off at a time, stack them up, roll them up into a little bundle, and then just slice through them. Kind of like with the shallots, I'm not worried about how big or how small they are as long as they're kind of consistent, because we're just going to blend it all up again later. Okay, so you're just going to keep picking through your leaves off your plants, roll them up. Oh, even Churchy thinks the basil smells really, really good. I could not keep her off the counter. She didn't actually eat it, so don't worry. Next step. We're going to add in our roasted tomatoes. They've been hanging out in the oven for half an hour. They're gorgeous. We're going to add those into our stock. Once the tomatoes are in our stock, we're going to add that basil in that we just chopped up into small pieces. And then we're going to stir it up and we're going to let that hang out and let those flavors blend and meld together for about 7 to 10 minutes. Okay, make sure that's all nicely incorporated. Once that's happened, get out your immersion blender, also known as a stick blender. If you don't have one, you can find them pretty much anywhere, Amazon, Target, all those great places. And we're just going to go ahead and blend this all up until it is a nice, smooth consistency. Our basil's barely noticeable anymore. Our onions are pulverized and incorporated into our soup. My immersion blender is just 1 speed. I know they have other ones out there that are multi-speed. I've had this thing forever. So my caution to you is start slow. If you go too fast with this, you may end up with soup all over your kitchen, which isn't really the goal. So we'll get that nicely smoothed out. Once it's the consistency you like, we're going to add in some heavy cream. I'm going to use probably about 8 ounces. This is a 16-ounce container. I'm probably going to use about half of it. I don't usually measure. I usually go by the color. So as my tomato soup starts to lighten up, as you can see here, I know I'm pretty good. So I'm going to keep blending this up until it's all incorporated throughout my entire soup. Once I've got it where I like it, now it's time to do some seasoning. A little bit of sea salt. Looks like I'm doing a lot, but remember, this is a ton of soup. This is probably at least 6 cups of liquid here. And then some freshly ground black pepper, which was not in my original recipe, which I actually got from my brother back in the day. His didn't have basil, didn't have pepper. I've messed with it over the years, and I've got it where I like it. Sorry, Andrew. Then the secret, it's really, really cold, or it's starting to get really, really cold here now. So we're going to throw in some cayenne pepper to add a little bit of warmth to the soup. It's already a beautiful, satisfying, creamy soup. That cayenne pepper just gives you that extra feeling of warmth on these really, really cold days that are coming up. So we'll get that all nicely blended up. And then the important thing here, because we're working with such a large quantity, you gotta taste. We've said it before, season lightly, add a little bit here at a time, taste it, and then add more, because you can always add more, but you can't take it out once it's in there. You don't want an overly salty or overly cayenne flavored soup, okay? I needed a little bit more cayenne, a little bit more salt. You might too. Add little bits as you go. So we'll get that all blended up. And then my little cheesy crouton experiment. I've got this garlic Tuscan bread that I've used in the past that I absolutely loved. I shoved it back in that 450-degree oven for about 5 minutes, flipped it about halfway through, got it all nice and toasty. And then I've got some Parmesan cheese. So I just took my little zester here and grated some down right over the top. And then that's going to go back in that oven for about 2 to 3 minutes. I just want that cheese to get melty. I don't want to make these croutons any toastier or crunchier than they are. And there is our creamy tomato basil soup with the extra added bonus of some cheesy croutons. It actually turned out way better than I thought it was going to. I usually just make a grilled cheese or some kind of panini to dip, but by all means, give the cheesy croutons a try. If you like this video, give us a thumbs up. Consider subscribing if you haven't already. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again next week.